Hi, it's Mike with AskTractorMike.com. Well, I'm going to talk about a component on every tractor, every model, every brand that's been built for the last 50 or 60 years that a lot of people don't know what it does until they've played with it just a little bit, and then it's done something bad. And what I'm going to talk about today is a flow control valve. And I'm going to answer a viewer letter. And I answered this viewer with bad information, and I'm going to talk about that today too. What generally happens with this valve, and what it is that little knob between your ankles below the seat. And there's a little knob right there, and if you turn it while the tractor's running, it doesn't do anything. So you may be down there, well, I wonder what this does, and you turn it a few turns, didn't do anything, and you go on your merry way. And then the next time you get on your tractor, you've got a finish mower or a bush hog or something up in the air, and you put your position control lever forward, and it stays up in the air. And you end up calling the dealer, what's wrong? Or we had a customer one time when I worked in the dealership world that loaded his tractor up. He was convinced he had destroyed his hydraulic system because the implement wouldn't go down. He hauled it an hour and a half from his house to the dealership. And my service manager went out and opened his flow control valve. The implement came down. I thought the guy was going to kiss my service manager on the lips. He was so happy he didn't have a major failure with his tractor. But that's what happens. If you turn that flow control valve in all the way with an implement up in the air, your 3-point won't go down. That's all it is. But why is that even there? And what else does it do? Well, let's first get to my letter. Letter today comes from Val. And Val says, greetings. Road gear on my tractor is about 14 miles per hour. When moving between fields over country roads, it just doesn't feel right to have a heavy attachment hanging out on the 3-point hitch, bouncing up and down with every bump. It just feels like the bouncing must put some very heavy hydraulic loads on the seals in the 3-point system. Do you have any observation and or suggestions about this? Thank you for the service you provide to this community. Val. Well, Val, I responded by email right after you reached out, and I told you something that is, now I find out, wrong. I always thought, because I heard this from somebody somewhere in my past, that if you turn that flow control valve all the way in and you rode an implement, that protects the internal parts of the 3-point system. And before I preached this on my YouTube channel, I thought I better check that out. And so every video I watched, every resource I looked at, didn't say anything about that. And so I reached out to my old service manager, Sam, and I asked him, and he said, no, not true. You're still putting pressure on your valves and your piston and your seals inside if you bounce up and down the road, even with that valve shut. So Val, the information I told you was wrong, and I'm glad I checked it out. But to be fair, if you're bouncing up and down the road, I will give you one thing you might want to look at. But the 3-point system rarely fails from roading. I asked Sam, my old service manager, and he's been working on tractors for decades, and he says he's seen maybe 2 or 3 failures in that 3-point system and not necessarily from roading stuff back and forth. So I don't think you've really got much to worry about there. But let's talk about that flow control valve, or on Val's tractor, it's called a slow return valve. And what that valve does is a couple of things. First off, it adjusts the time it takes for your implement to drop. And that's kind of important. If you've got a real heavy implement on the back, you don't want it slamming down to the ground. If you've got a light implement, it may take a long time for it to go down if it's set for a heavier implement. So what you do to adjust that flow control valve is real simple. Now I'm going to show you how this works. I've got my valve closed. I've got my bush hog down. I'm going to start the tractor. And I'm going to raise my 3-point. Now the cutter goes up like it should. It's almost all the way up. But because the valve is closed, when I push this forward, nothing happens back here. So if I want to adjust how fast my 3-point goes up and down and fix my problem of my bush hog being stuck up in the air, I'm going to turn this valve. This has got pressure on it now, so I'm going to use a wrench. It's a number 14 metric. And when I turn this valve, the bush hog's going to come down, and then I'm going to adjust the flow rate to get it to a level that I want it to, so it comes up, down smoothly, and when it goes up, it doesn't jerk. And it won't take much turning. And when I turn it, you'll hear oil flow through, and you'll see the bush hog in the back come down. And there it goes. And now it's down. Now I'm going to check to see if I've got it where I want it by starting the tractor and moving the lever up and down to see how fast the flow is and if that's good or bad. Here we go. Oh wow, perfect. Got it the first time. Nice and smooth up and down. No jerking. That's where you want it. The other thing that little valve does, if you've got something that, let's say you've got a load on a carry-all or something that you want to keep up in the air and you're going to shut your tractor off, raise that up, turn that valve in, and that will lock it in the upright position. But as far as protecting the 3-point system, it won't do that. But Val, let's get to your question. If you're bouncing up and down the road too much, there's one thing I know you can do to stop that. Well, really two. I mean, you could slow down, but if you're really wanting to get between fields, you don't want to do that. But of course, tractors are going to bounce a lot because they've got a fixed axle. They don't have a suspension system. Most of them don't. Some of the bigger tractors do, but most of the small ones, all of the small ones don't. But one thing you might look at, and this is something I noticed when I was in the dealership world, a lot of manufacturers, for whatever reason, ship tractors to the dealers with way too much air in the back tires. I don't know if it makes it easier to batten them down on the truck bed or why they do it. But when we were prepping tractors at the dealership I used to work at, we would notice that tires came in with 30, 35, 40 pounds of air, and that's way, way too much. Now, it'll say to inflate the tires on the back more. And this is mostly with R4 tires. But we found that about the optimum pressure was about 20 PSI in the back tires. And that'll give you a nicer ride, less bouncing of your 3-point, and better wear on the back tires. And I noticed on my tires, I kept them at 20 pounds per square inch for a long time. And I noticed one time we had a kind of a drought and I was getting a dust wear pattern. If you want to see if you've got too much air, if you've got a kind of a thin strip of dust that's around like 2 inches in the middle of the tire, that's telling you it's wearing right there. And so I let even more air out of my back tires, and now I run around 12 to 15 pounds in the back tires all the time. And I feel like I'm getting good wear and I get a good ride, and that'll, again, reduce that bouncing. So a question I get asked a lot is, okay, so the back tires, you want 15 to 20 pounds of pressure in them. What do you want on the front tires? Well, my recommendation on them is go with the manufacturer recommendation, the manufacturer of the tires that's on the sidewall. And if you're using a front end loader, go toward the max. If they say, put 35 pounds in maximum, put 35 pounds in if you're using a front end loader. And if you're doing field work, say the minimum is 28 pounds, drop it down to 28 pounds. But in doing field work for wear and for ride, I like it toward the bottom end of the manufacturer's recommendation. Front end loader, I want it right at the max. So Val, I gave you wrong information earlier, and I'm sorry, I don't know where I got that you could turn that flow control valve in and protect your 3-point. Somebody told me that in my past, or maybe I'm getting to the age I kind of remember stuff that didn't happen, so maybe I conjured that up in my brain, but it does no good for helping protect your 3-point system, so disregard that. I appreciate you watching my videos. I would be honored if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can do that by clicking the mic face icon, and make sure you check the bell so you get notified when I post future videos. Here's a link to my website and the Tractor Fun Store with really cool things for sale for the tractor owner to help support my channel. And here's another couple of videos you might want to watch. Thanks for watching.